Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Versus Stars podcast. How my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click that subscribe button, everybody. This is an amazing episode because Wes Mack returns from the mothership. We talk his new country album, Hummingbird. Now come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Mack. Thank you so much for coming back to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
It is my pleasure to be back, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, totally my pleasure. So recently you released a new album called Hummingbird. You appeared in a new film. You appeared in a new TV series. So how do you organize your life to balance all these things together? And how much of a task is it to get yourself in some sort of rhythm with all this?
I don't know that I have a methodology. No, I definitely have no methodology to it. It's very go with the horse that's running. It's sort of the thing of like, cool, if this is busy over here and this needs my time, this is what I'll attend to right now. And then if I have a moment, I'll circle over to something else. So it kind of just becomes a game of like, yeah, when you're working on a show or a movie or something, that probably gets all your attention. I find music I can kind of create usually on my own downtime is what I'll do a lot of the recording of it and make that
Mm.
work around, just it's just a decreasing ladder of priority to kind of get around to things. And then just, whatever feels inspiring or whatever's paying the bills, and you kind of migrate through it.
So is there ever a concern of creative burnout? Because once again, I mean,
Mm,
to do those three things, I mean, once again, I don't do any of those three, but I imagine any one of them is hard, and doing any three of them is probably nearly impossible. So, I
sure.
mean, is there creative burnout? Do you ever just kind of like feel mentally like just fried that you can't do one thing because you kind of burned out trying to.
Yeah, I think that definitely sometimes it's weird because they can kind of work in two ways of that. You can burn out and be tired and in the same way with anything in life. Sometimes you actually kind of get energized by one. Like if I feel like I write a good song or something like that, it might allow me to go and audition for something and work on something and feel um I find when you're working on a lot of things, you're maybe a little less precious about everything you're working on. So that can be good because I find that almost defeats me more than burnout. Some of the time, it's just obsessing over getting things the way I want them. And if you don't have that much time, if you have to do an audition, be on set, and finish recording something and do a song right and all that, you only have much time you can spend on each of those things, and then you got to move on to whatever you're moving on to next, which can be nice because it forces you to let go of things where I remember early in my acting career, particularly when I just had probably less things going on, you would audition for something and then you would relive that audition for 2 weeks and beat yourself up over how it went. I don't think I really spend much time doing that anymore. I mean, every now and then there's one that kind of bugs you, but I think I do better being busy. But the burnout is definitely real on it. I find the thing that I almost have to force myself to do more than work is find times to actually rest.
Mm.
Um, because when you do a bunch of different things and it's all most of my career is very self-guided, there's always more you could do. There's always a film script you could be working on, something you could be trying to audition for, songs you could be recording. There's no, or just like the business networking of it all. You can spend an infinite amount of time, and in your brain you go, okay, the more time I apply, the better this will go because it's all proportional to how hard you work on it. But at some point, I think that starts you hit kind of a failure point where yeah, you're burning out, you're
Mm.
maybe the work suffers, or maybe it just becomes not fun to be doing, as any work can. But when you reach that point, you start questioning, why am I doing this? What am I doing? So it's trying to thread the needle and find the sweet spot between, being creatively satisfied, keeping your career going, not burning out, and, having some kind of life in there. Yeah.
Is there ever like a creative bleed where you, 'cause again, as an actor and a musician, everything else, that you find yourself thinking or writing or doing whatever based on another a character that you're playing? Like you kind of, whatever thought process you had for one
Mm,
character, it starts bleeding into what your songwrite would be, or the TV character kind of bleeds into the film character a little bit. I mean, is there ever
yeah,
that
totally. I remember particularly early in my career. I remember I was on Smallville for a couple episodes. I was playing a supervillain, and it was like pretty over the top, like very twirling my mustache kind of villainry. And I remember for 6 months after, I almost had to sort of deprogram myself because I remember seeing some of my audition tapes from that era afterwards, and they were bad. They were trying to take big comic book villain stuff and apply it to things that should have been more subtle.
Mm.
So that's one to watch out for. I think that maybe affects me less now. But there's definitely like, you can't go down a rabbit hole in one thing and not have it affect you somewhere else. But I do find I transist pretty easily between like, I'm working on writing something, or I'm working on producing something, or I'm working on acting. I've done them all for long enough that it feels pretty natural to just, it's like you can go brush your teeth and then put on a coat after it. And those are pretty different tasks, admittedly, but they like, you do them enough, and it's comfortable enough. You might have a hard time if you try and brush your teeth and put on your coat at the same time.
So there's no album we can go back and be like, wow, he sounds like a twirling mustache supervillain in that one. I wonder what's going on in his head. Oh,
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, there's vaults of audition tapes, though. I mean, or yeah, I would highly recommend if you want to watch just a master class in overacting to watch my episodes of Smallville. I was really giving it there. It was one of my first parts. It was my first like big part in something. But like, man, I was having fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was over the top, and shooting ice bullets out of my hand. I think my entrance line is I walk out and I set off like this massive ice storm that knocks Green Arrow over. And I go, anyone up for some ice cream? And it's just so over the top. It's funny.
Do you know the name of the episode? I get the feeling listening, I'm gonna have to go back and find it.
It's Absolute Justice, and so they actually did. It was a TV movie. It's a 2 hour rather than a 1 hour, and it's the Justice Society. They brought in a bunch of guest stars. They had Hawkman and Dr. Fate, and me playing Icicle. And I'm hunting down the members of the old like retired Justice Society. And so it's pretty neat, man. They had that sort of legendary comic writer Jeff Johns, I believe, wrote the episodes. So it was for a dude. I don't know how old I was at the time, but it was just the start of my acting career. I was a few roles in. It was very fun.
Suddenly, the Max has a sudden boost in ratings for this one episode of
Yeah,
Smallville.
yeah.
Watch it.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't know if it lives on a streamer anywhere.
Oh, it's gotta be Max. It would definitely be on Max. So Max owns all the DC stuff is owned by Max.
Okay,
So it's there.
cool.
It's findable.
Oh, sweet. All right. I haven't watched it in a very, 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 very long time. It lives in my mind, though.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, though, you play a lot of. Trying to think of the best way best word to use. Troublemakers. We'll go with troublemakers. Because once again, imperfect. You played a bit of a troublemaker. Well, the guy wanted me to hear about a bit of a troublemaker.
Yeah, I maintain I was the good guy of that whole thing. Like, if you looked at the moral positions of everyone on that show, I think I was the most like altruistic good guy, but in a world of very jaded individuals. I mean, I also kind of lost my mind and tried to kill everyone for just a brief period of time for 5 minutes. I reeled it in.
We all get there once in a while, right? We all.
Oh, dude, it's the holiday season. You know, you're at the mall. Somebody cuts you off. You turn into a copper rage monster and try and punch everybody. Why not?
But at least that's understandable. You know, a lot of viewers probably think to myself, yeah, I've been in traffic. I wanted to do that.
Yeah, man, it's not easy. Or rather, it's. I have an easy enough time finding my anger.
Well, you also you're in a new TV show, Transplant, where you play Ryan Struff, who's also a troublemaker as well. So what is it about you? Do you think that you gravitates towards these roles of these kind of people?
You know, I honestly think about that sometimes because there usually is some like, you know, I wonder like, does Sean Bean seem like a man who should die? Like, because we kill him. We love to kill him in a lot of shows. Yeah. And I'm like, do I seem like that hateable of a person? I don't know. Sometimes I think it's just the redhead quality of we culturally love to do that. Sometimes I think I can just tap pretty easily into being kind of grating and petty and difficult if I want to. And probably there's a bunch of anger that I have a pretty easy time finding my way to. And I feel like is lovely in acting because it's sort of a healthy space where it's like, cool, you want a rage monster today? I can give you that. And then I can go home and feel like a relaxed guy. I don't know. I've your guess is as good as mine as to which of those it is. It's probably some smattering of them, but I think it's that I've usually had an easy time getting into that, like just a darker shade of myself that feels comfortable to slide into.
Well, I mean, we're best in a little bit. We're going to talk about Hummingbird, which is some really kind of sweet songs on that. And I was wondering, is it because you release all your hate and your anger and your acting that you're able
Yeah.
to kind of just chill when it's music time?
Yeah, you know, when you're doing like poppy country music, there's not a lot of, you know, it's not like I'm playing in like Disturbed or like Slipknot or something like that. I guess, you know, maybe that would be the other way around. Um, yeah, I mean, I like to think that the sort of different creative avenues that I have in my life allow me to kind of fully paint with the big palette. Like I like, you know, I don't know where this. It's a famous quote of some varietal, and I can't remember its origin, but it's something to the effect of that, like a full living a full day as a human, you should laugh and cry and feel anger and like feel the full palette of emotion. I think there is something to that. I mean, it might not be super
Hmm.
practical every day to go through all that, but if you go through your whole life and you kind of just exist in one little corner of the pie chart, there's probably a lot being left on the table. So, in life there's a lot of things that make me feel a lot of the whole spectrum of it. It's a zany world, but it's nice as well when the art can kind of touch a bunch of those things as well. So I'm grateful to have some outlets from that.
See, I'm now amazed that you haven't played an angry rocker or something. I feel like I feel like that's like the missing character for you to play.
Yeah, dude, totally. I think usually when I've played a musician over the years, it's been very sweet.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a kind individual. Um, yeah, I've yet to get the drunken coke fueled fiend who's losing his mind. I've read for it a few times. So, you know,
Yeah.
I'll keep swinging at that one.
So, as a musician, like, what are those rehearsals like when you get to play? You know, is it more fun to play the a-hole than it is to play the good guy?
You know, I think the weirdest part that most people don't talk about, in my opinion, is if you ever go to a city and you're cheering against the local sports team, feels like that. When you're playing the villain on set, you are on the opposite happiness schedule as everyone else. And so when you shoot scenes, and I found this where I'm me, Wesley, I'm mad by the end because I'm trying to win and the entire cast is stacked against me if I'm the villain. And the writers are stacked against me too. Like I can't win, you know, because the villain seldom does. When you're playing the heel, you kind of just have to get on the ride that like you're gonna push them to the edge and they're going to probably beat you in the end, and you have to do it authentically. You can't telegraph that you know you're going to lose,
Mm,
and you have to allow yourself to lose and feel the loss, because that's the thing about like a good villain is that like you have to believe that they could win,
mm,
and then when they lose, you as the audience are satisfied by their you know their pathos, the chagrin, the crappiness that they feel. So having to go through the motions of that on set is sometimes very strange because you'll get inherently your character. I find sometimes bleeds into between takes a little bit. So when you're the bad guy that everyone is against, you do feel some like animosity in my experience on set. And I'm not like a very well, I think the word like method acting
yeah.
gets sort of dragged around in the wrong way and is inappropriately used a lot of time when you actually look up what the method means. But I'm not someone who is when I'm a villain, I'm not slapping people's coffees out of their hands between takes. But you do stay in like a headspace of it. I'm not one to usually be super chatty. You know, when you're trying to face off and have an epic battle against someone, I find it's nice to maybe keep a little bit of distance between
Mm,
them. So you can feel that. You can feel that tension on set in just a natural way that you arrive at, where you can still be totally professional. Like I think it's important to be able to, you know, shake hands, have a hug with whoever at the end of every take. Like when I was shooting Cold Pursuit with Liam Neeson a handful of years ago, between like every take, because he was throwing me against a wall or whatever, he would always go after me, Wesley, is that okay for you? And I'd be like, yeah, Liam, I'm good. And it was good because we could rumble for the time and then let it go. So, yeah, but in that case, again, I'm kind of the heel in that moment. So it's a strange experience being on the sets. It always puts you just 1 degree of separation away. Whereas when you're playing the sweet good guy, everyone's on your team.
I mean, is there ever a question of ego as the villain? Because like, I remember a story, I don't know if it's real or not real, that in the contract of The Rock and I think Statham, that they couldn't fall in any scene. They couldn't be seen to lose because the ego is that they always the winner.
Interesting.
And as the villain, you have to lose. You sometimes have to be killed. You have to be the guy who gets beaten up or whatever. Is there ever the ego that like you don't want to
Yes.
for that to end?
I think 100%. I think you're lying to yourself if you feel totally okay with just getting pulverized. Like if you care, if you're invested, if you've built a character that's worth having,
Yeah.
it's not fun, and it shouldn't be fun to lose. And that, in my opinion, is the probably one of the hardest things of all of acting is that like you have to acting looks bad if a character because now what am I trying to say? If you avoid the loss and they foil you, they wreck your plans, and you decide as the actor, I'm not going to let it affect me, and you just smile back at them and be, that's not. I don't think that's authentic. You know what I mean? Like when you have your lifelong plans to destroy whatever foiled, that should hurt. If it doesn't hurt, you're not embracing what's happening. So I definitely feel the ego flare sometimes in myself, and maybe it's not even ego might not even fully be the right word for it, but just the like you're the part of you that's trying to truthfully grab on to the character is like, no, I don't want to lose. I'm here to win. And so you have to like find a way to let yourself do that and realize that like there's somewhat of a dance to be done there. There's something fun in the loss too, if you can allow yourself to find it.
Now, for instance, like Transplant, you enter season 4.
Yeah.
And like so you're kind of your character appearance is kind of a troublemaker, a bit of an I think a bit of an a-hole. But because you're walking in on a set after 3+ years of them doing the show, they're probably more in their niche. You're not in the niche. You're brand new to the show. Does that make it easier to play the character? And how hard is it to walk onto a set that's already established and be like, I want, here I am,
Yeah. I think a lot of it is dictated by what the cast and crew, the tone that they set. So I will say Transplant was great. That I was squaring off against the characters June and Dr. Novak, and both of the actors there were wonderful at just being nice people to me between takes. They welcomed me on. They were introducing me to people. They were like, oh, cool, this is over here, because they've been there for years. That makes it way easier to come in and play and not feel, because it's strange when you're entering a show late in the game, or if you're day playing on a show and you're just there for one day. There's many situations where it's a little nerve-wracking, where it's everybody knows each other. It's like you're the new kid at school, and you add the fact that you're the new kid at school and you're difficult. So in that case, they were great. But I've been on shows where it's not very comfortable, where the cast is sometimes you'll get this when it's a younger cast that's kind of high school age. You'll get a cliquey kind of show where it's very like new guy, like you can sit over there kind of thing. And then you really have to like, then you come and do your job. You're there between action and cut, and you take care of yourself as best as you can. But it's wonderful. And Transplant was a good example of like, cool, they welcome me in. And so it felt easy to play there.
Did they offer any advice about being on the show, the fan base, or anything like that helps you deal with being part of the show?
Sometimes shows will. I mean, the biggest thing that Transplant offered that I really appreciate is they have a medical boot camp like every single week on the weekend when they're not filming, where they teach you any relevant, like if you're playing a doctor who is doing a medical procedure that week, they bring in real doctors and nurses and they walk you through the procedure. And they show you exactly what you would be doing, what you wouldn't be doing, with all the gear and everything there. And it's on a hospital set. And there's a bunch of like real doctors and nurses there. And that to me is a game changer, where it's like, I can prepare as an actor and I can do a decent amount of book research and look up things on YouTube, but there'll be limits, right? I'm not able to quickly just pick up an entire medical education. So to have that, because when I auditioned for Transplant, I always like to have something real to do with my hands in a scenario like that, because I'm supposed to be performing a surgery. I took a piece of paper and 5 paper clips and I put it out of frame, and I was just clipping the paper clips onto the edge of the paper and taking them off. But you do that out of frame, and you're serious about it and you're invested in it. It gives you something, it gives you enough to execute an audition. That does not work as well if you are in person there. I don't want to just be fidgeting my hands around. So it was really, that was one of the best things that they do, that they equip you with that kind of training.
So if you're ever on an airplane, they're like, "Is there a doctor?" You can be like, "Technically, I've seen it done. I can help out."
Yeah, it's like if you need a wound debrided and cleaned, and it's specifically from a crush injury, like you just needed to do the water and suction, I'm your guy. I got that one. Although my character is not a good doctor.
No.
I like object. Well, I do a bad job. That's kind of part of the thing. That's the problem. So that actually made it easier for me in a sense, where I'm like, cool, I don't have to be great at this because I'm not supposed to be. It's much harder when you're supposed to be a master at something.
Yeah, it like, have you like for instance, being a singer, right? And also we're going to your out new album in a minute. Is it harder to act like a bad or regular singer when you actually can do it?
I have yet to have to act like a bad singer, and I often think about it because I've seen people have to do it, and it feels, that's like where your ego will come in again as well, to be like, oh, I want to show everyone that I'm a good singer. But if the character is a bad singer, you've got to just roll with it. It's also tricky in that, like, for a really good singer, sometimes it's almost more difficult to sing out of tune. You will naturally drift towards doing it right out of sort of muscle memory. So it takes, like, if I want to sing something very wrong, I have to like concentrate on it to be like, cool, put all the notes wrong, like put them in all the wrong places. I'm much better at being a bad doctor. Much better at that.
It kind of reminds me, there was have you ever seen The Big Bang Theory?
I have just gotten heavily into, okay, so I'm only on season 2. My girlfriend and I, after, it's been around for 15 years or whatever, hadn't watched it. We just dove in the last like month and are just flying through it and quite enjoying it.
Well, without giving away too much, there's an episode later on in the series. I think somewhere around maybe season 4 or 5 or 6, somewhere in that range, where all the characters, including some of the newer ones, have to sing a song.
Okay.
But the thing is, a couple of them apparently are like trained Broadway singers.
Right.
Some of them are just like regular people singers, And apparently, the ones who were like Broadway trained had the hardest time trying to figure out how to sound like they're not. So to make it seem believable, I was thinking to myself,
yeah,
it'd be so complicated for someone who can do it to pretend you can't.
I buy that. Any skill like that, it's hard to turn off skills that are almost muscle memory. To tell like a professional skater or swimmer or any like number of skills to just suck at that. You have to try really hard. You have to you almost have to give yourself intentional. Like when I've had to sing for an audition badly, you relearn the song with some wrong notes in it. It's almost easier than just being like, well, just wing it. Because as soon as you mentally check out, I find for me, I will suck back into like the appropriate scale a lot of the time. Because, you do, I've done this my entire life. So kind of you drift towards it.
I don't know how they even would evaluate that. Oh, this person doesn't sound like they're bad enough. Or
I know, but it's like it can take you out if your character is just supposed to be your average person, and then you sound like an opera singer, and it's not acknowledged in the script in any way. It's like, why did that just like I don't know? Do you know the movie Love Actually?
I know of it. I have not seen it.
There's just an instance in it where Hugh Grant is at someone's door, and these kids. He's playing the prime minister of England and Britain, and he's looking for someone, and these kids ask him if he'll sing Christmas carols, and he goes, "Oh no!" And then they're like, "Please!" And he's like, "All right." So he starts singing. He goes, "Good King Wenceslas," and his driver / bodyguard is with him, who kind of joins in halfway. And I'm glad they do acknowledge it, because the guy all of a sudden goes, "On the feast of Stephen," and he's like a really good singer. And then all of a sudden, he just stops and looks at him. If that was not commented upon in any way in the movie, it would be very weird that just his driver, who has no other lines, is like an epic singer.
So your new album, Hummingbird, was produced during the pandemic. So how did that impact the creation of the album?
All right, hugely. It changed the entire way I kind of do music. most of what I had done before, a lot like my last couple albums was very me personally in studios. Anytime we're working on something, usually I was with the producer or with an engineer or something. And a lot of this record was just me out at my cabin tracking things on my own and sending tracks to different producers in different studios in different countries and piecing the thing together. So it was a really kind of modular album that was built in pieces. And it, but the upshot to that was it just freed me up to work with whoever I wanted, to work when I wanted. So I don't know. I by the end I quite enjoyed it. It was a learning curve early on, to be sure, though.
So the thing I think with a lot of us, I don't know what your experience was like during the lockdown, but I mean, obviously I had a different experience with lockdown.
Sure.
Is that for a lot of people I've spoken to, is that in a way, some of your perceptions of things change because of that you've experienced that long time of solitude and it affects relationships, affects a lot of things. So
Yeah.
when you were thinking about writing and your lyrics and everything else, how you approached it, did your thought process change during the lockdown based on whatever you were experiencing during, that time period?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I I recorded a whole other album that I haven't released during the pandemic. It's not a country album. I recorded this sort of
Really?
like alt pop, bit of like kind of indie rock album
Nice.
that I really liked. And at some point, I will probably release it. Just that's what I felt like doing, and I did most of that in 2020. Um, and then I was like, oh yeah, I was kind of in the middle of making a country record here, so I continued and looped back around and did that. And I'm still not really sure what to do with this because it's not the genre that I've typically done. I feel a little maybe self-conscious of releasing something that's like a decent far cry away and knowing what to do with it. But I mean, that's just one little chapter of it. That was just me for a few months. I think the pandemic just sort of it stopped everything and then made you try and assess what you wanted to continue, and how you wanted to continue. It definitely changed a lot of like logistics, like for other recording stuff, but also like the whole acting world changed. I mean, I haven't auditioned in person since 2020. Everything I've done since has just been tapes, which personally I love because I can live anywhere I want. I can be anywhere I want. I can tape them. If you get an audition that is at 9 a.m. tomorrow, you need to cancel your morning. You need to change whatever you were going to do and be at that audition. But if you get an audition that is due at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, I could tape it now and then I could do whatever I want tomorrow. So there's a certain amount of freedom. But yeah, the pandemic, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's sort of all of life before March 2020 and all of life after. It just feels like it kind of dramatically changed a lot, at least for me.
Steve, you kind of just mentioned something that I was about to ask you about. I must admit, now I'm very curious about this pop rock rock album that you have. So now I'm gonna just push you to you had to release it now because now I'm like dying of curiosity what this is gonna sound like. But the question I was about to ask you actually was when you create a new album, where is like the line or the balance between stretching yourself creatively as an artist, but also not drifting away from what your fans want from you?
That's what that is the line I'm trying to find. I was really excited to do it, and it's funny. I've never talked about this in like an interview or anything, but it's like a 10-song record that's done. It's bigger than Hummingbird. Really? I spent more time on it. It was all tracked by me. When I finished it, I just felt like, yeah, I guess I don't know how like fans would respond to it. I don't know how the industry people who kind of support me would respond to it, and that maybe there is some fear there that, at least me, to be honest, that like if I put that out, does it make people go, oh well, he's lost the plot, he's it's wandering, and now I don't care about the country record about Hummingbird that gets released. So maybe there's like a bit of clinging to the safety there. But as I say that, I'm like, oh, I should probably rip the band-aid off and just finish it and put it out and let it be. I do need to, it hasn't been mixed yet, so it's all just been produced by me, so I need to lean a little bit more work into it. But as I think about it, like I think it was what I needed to write about at the time too, where it was like every genre has certain tropes that typically kind of dominate. Like country music is one that's notorious for has certain things that are like most country songs are about. And indie rock has a certain like kind of rebellious kind of quantity to it that when you're all of a sudden just in your house for months and months on end, I think I just felt like a degree of like needing something a little more energetic and at times angry. that maybe doesn't fit into some of the sweeter country music stuff. So I felt like I needed that. It was most important for me to record that for me, because that was just something I did as like, maybe it's not therapy, but it's surely therapeutic. So yeah, I don't know. I should release it, man. I should finish that up. It's something that's I should gradually pull it off the back burner.
If you, or let's say when you release it, will it be under like Wes Mack? You're gonna use like a stage name,
It's a good question. I created the stage name Nightly, and I did put a couple of things on the internet that are just like incomplete of it. And that was the name I was going to do it. I felt like it needed a different name to it because it's entirely different. It's like a different voicing. It's everything. All the vocals and everything are recorded very differently. Like the instrumentation, it's like night and day from a lot of my stuff, or at least it feels that way to me. Maybe they're closer than I realize. But yeah, that's my actually that's probably the biggest question is, do you release it as yourself or do you sort of put it as one step separated? I don't know.
It's kind of, I'm trying to remember who. There's been a few artists who have like switched genres. I think I can't remember who it was. There was like a couple that have done country and they moved into like more the rock.
Garth Brooks really famously did the one where he did Chris Gaines. He straight up created a second persona in the 90s and wore a wig and stuff. And people, I think, found that to be a little much. Like they found it was too far removed.
Yeah.
But I get wanting to. And most musicians I know, when you've been doing it for a long time, you have interests outside of your genre and outside of your style. And like you eventually just, I like all kinds of music. I find myself doing that record, creating the Nightly record, allowed me to come back around and care about making a country record. It like allowed me to exercise something in myself that I think otherwise felt like it was glaring. And then when I came back around to either write for my country stuff or to write, I do a fair bit of co-writing for other artists. To go back and do country rights for them felt way more satisfying because it was like, oh, I've scratched this other itch kind of thing. So I think you kind of have to try and acknowledge that stuff. I think if you just run yourself and just keep doing the exact same thing over and over, if it's not satisfying, you'll stagnate and just make things that suck.
Well, you can always do like a Prince thing. Like a symbol. Like you just like do like the
Totally.
The artist formerly known as Wes Mack.
And it's also, man, it's like maybe it's just my own ego to get out of the way of and go like, it doesn't matter that much. Like if nobody likes it, so what? I guess I think what it is for me that hangs me up on releasing it is I really like it and it sounds good to me to a level where I'm like, oh, I really want to give this a good shot at finding a big audience, which takes a lot of work and strategizing and figuring out, how you're going to do that. So maybe that's like something I get hung up on. I've just got like a hair in my eye.
Well, it kind of leads to this question of when you're creating a new album, are you writing or producing what you want to hear or what you think your fans want to hear?
Good question. I think it's a push and pull. I try to make music that I like. When I'm writing for other artists, it's an interesting one because you're trying to write something that they like, but also you as a responsible co-writer, if I've been brought in, especially if it's like an artist who's trying to get on the radio for the first time and they've got a record label and a management company and they all have an idea of what they want. You kind of have to try and take something that I care about because it's really hard to write something that you truly have nothing that you just don't care about, something that they care about, something that their team cares about, something that you think commercial radio or streaming will possibly allow in, and have that somehow tick all of those boxes simultaneously in a way that like feels authentic. And it's tricky to do. When you can do it though, it feels really good because like I like making things that I think can go somewhere, I wish I could be the pure artist who could just say like I just make art for just for the feel of it. And sometimes maybe I allow myself to, but I have a hard time with it when it's like the reality is it's my career and it's what I do to support myself. And if I'm going to spend a huge amount of time and energy and pour like myself into something, I want to know I can do something with it. And maybe that makes me, that gives me the tinge of being of saying like, oh, am I commercially selling out? And
Yeah.
maybe on some level, but I think if I'm really honest, I don't know almost anyone. No, I don't think I know any artist that doesn't care at all what people think of it. I've
Well,
heard many people try and say that they don't, but then their behavior doesn't really reflect
well,
it.
I mean, on the very small end, I do indie comic books. That's kind of like my thing. On
Cool.
the side, I do, yeah, I write indie comic. Can't draw, but I write them. And I've talked to a few people, and I'll listen to a few people. And they're like, "Well, if no one buys it, you did it for yourself." It's like, I'm like, that doesn't even register as like what makes sense. If no
I
one's
know.
reading it,
I know it's really hard. There's sort of this morality that we impose on art that an artist
yeah,
should be this like inherently starving creature that just needs to exercise the art out of them. But it's like I'll always chuckle when you see an actor who's fairly famous will go and do like a very bad movie, and you're like, they knew it was a bad movie when
yeah,
they signed on, uh, but they might have made $2 million to go and do it. I find sometimes people will rake people over the coals over that for selling out in that capacity. I'm like, I don't know. That sounds like a fun way to spend a couple months, maybe that pays for their house.
it reminds me of a story. There was an actor in the world of sci-fi, a well-known actor. And if you listen to some of my older interviews, you'll be able, someone if you've heard all of them, you know which I'm talking about. I
Right.
was interviewing him, and I had because I wanted to hit the interview, so I wanted to talk about some of his new projects.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, so I had my head, how I'm going to talk about the project. Everything was, was a big deal. And so
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm curious what he says about this. So I was like, how do you, what motivated you to be in this film? And I was expecting this like great answer. He goes, money. They paid it, the paycheck passed, and I did it. And sometimes you just do things for the money. I was like, oh, I did not expect that as a response from
But
anyone
it's like
selling a movie.
where it's so valid is that like that's what most people do their job for. And
Right.
it's like I feel sometimes that artists are expected to be these sacred creatures that like wouldn't do it for the money. Otherwise you're a sellout. It's
Right.
like, but you gotta do it for the money. Sometimes I want to the fellow who played Green Arrow on Smallville, Justin Hartley, who's gone on to be like absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Was in a bunch of shows. I was just again straight out of acting school kind of thing, like new guy on set, and he was sitting next to me in the makeup chair one day, and he goes like, Les, let me tell you something. When you're choosing roles, there's three things you got to think about, and any given project that you agree to do has to have two of these three things. There's going to be the script, the story, there's going to be the character, there's going to be the money. It's got to have two or three. And he's like, unless there's enough money, in which case it can just have that one.
That's awesome.
And I remember I laughed at the time, and it felt like he was kind of joking with me. And the longer I've been in the industry, I'm like, no, that tracks. That seems like
Well, I
because
mean,
who doesn't want to do the great beautiful art? Who doesn't want? I don't. I that's it. It feels amazing when you can do stuff that feels authentic and important, and like it touches people's lives. And I've gotten to touch that a handful of times in my career, and it is the coolest feeling you'll ever get. Um, but you also at the same time are making a career. You're supporting yourself. You're making decisions that affect your whole life. So there's a push and a pull.
well, I mean, it'd be like being a great speechwriter. I mean, you can write the most amazing speech ever written, but if no one's going to hear it, it defeats the purpose of the speech. I mean, it really
Indeed.
matters when people are listening to it. Same thing with, I mean, art. It really does help art if someone actually gets to like look at it or hear it. I mean, other than that, it's just you.
Yeah, dude. It's totally in a vacuum. And I mean, the thing that I always trust in myself, uh, I love music. I know I would and have for my whole life played music regardless of if anyone has heard it. I know long before I had any like commercial success, I still picked up a guitar almost every day because it makes me feel good. Uh, and I suspect long after I have any commercial success, I will continue to pick up a guitar every day, or as often as I can. So that to me gives me a good instinct that it's the right thing for me to be doing because I pick it up and I do it because it scratches an itch in me that is always there.
Mm.
When I'm able to find a way to point that like creative impulse in a direction where it's like, oh, I can have a career with this too. That's great because it's not just like a money component or like a notoriety thing. It's also it affords you interesting opportunities of like I get to collaborate maybe with a producer who's really talented or a writer who's really talented that's really fun to work with where we get to make something that's really cool And you don't get to do that if you don't have any kind of like career juice going on. It's the same, in the acting world, where it's like the day I got to, work on set for a week or two, we're working with Liam Neeson, was great. The man's a really good actor beyond any of the like commercial success of anything. He's just really good at what he does. There's a reason he's there. And so getting to work beside him is a ton of fun. It's like those are the moments you live for in it. So it's, you're caught up chasing this complicated thing that when you can get it all firing at once can be both creatively and career satisfying all at the same time.
Well, I mean, I definitely agree. And like something like with your new album, Hummingbird, right? How, like when you talk about, like you said, there's some country music tropes, right, or trappings.
Yeah, totally.
How do you navigate that minefield? So once again, it's yours, but once again, you can't not follow some of the rules because that's your expectations on it. And how does Hummingbird kind of work within that field?
I think it's just like an awareness of like, I don't think there's any truly original art. I think art tends to be derivative. Like you're always kind of building on a big castle of other people who've done stuff. I always laugh that like every generation, probably many times a generation, will have a song about throwing your hands in the air and waving them like you just don't care. It recurs over and over again. It's not that people who get into one incarnation of that haven't ever heard the other one. It's not that it's anything new, but it doesn't need to be. It's that like we as humans only exist for however many years you get, and you want to experience something new that you go, cool, that's my version of that song, and I associate it with that artist and this time in my life and this live show. And so you build these moments as an artist that you get to share then with an audience. And where I feel like you can be, where at least I mentally can be okay with knowing that I'm at worst being derivative and at best being inspired by something else, is that like you're sharing a new moment. By the time you've written that song and it's come through me, it's its own thing. There's only so many chords, there's only so many themes, there's only so many melodies. I can pick apart every one of my songs and tell you 3 songs that it owes its DNA to, for sure. And I can do it for most songs, because if you hang out in this business long enough, you just hear it.
Right.
But like you're creating a new thing out of some old parts. And I think that's the best you can hope for most of the time. Every now and then you get to find something that maybe feels really new and authentic. And that's, I think, what everybody's always hacking and looking for, kind of thing. But I don't feel any shame or guilt in it, because I find all the best artists that I've ever heard from on this, to varying levels of professionalism, all point to like you're all pulling from the masters and stuff. You listen to like a Beatles record, like Paul McCartney wanted to be Little Richard when he was doing the whoos and stuff like that. It's like cool, but they're the Beatles. They are their own thing, and Little Richard is his own thing. And there's some DNA shared there, but that's okay. It's part of the lineage.
Well, I think on the new album, I think my favorite song of yours, and especially lyrically, my favorite is "Looking for You."
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think that was for me anyway. That's, I think, the best from not only musically but also lyrically. And one of the lyrics is someone is winning the race and someone is coming in last. Now
Yeah.
it kind of, because it's basically sort of love, kind of gives it like a competitive nature to it a little bit, or at least that's how I viewed it.
Yeah.
Now, is it competitive because of the suitor? Is it competitive because of trying to win over the girl? Or is it competitive with yourself, trying to figure out how you're going to overcome whatever it is you're lacking to make it happen?
It's so funny. My favorite thing, I love hearing other people like what any of my lyrics like hit them as, because the way you've described it there is different actually entirely than I view it in writing it. And so I'm always hesitant to stomp on anyone else's, because I'm really firmly of the opinion of whatever you heard was right.
Stomp it away.
Because I, well, okay, for me, I mean, it was sort of one of those big life songs of like, I think the chorus just breaks down like that this whole crazy world is proceeding out there, and that everything in the quantum sense, everything is happening. Somebody is winning the race, somebody's coming in last. So all these things are happening out there, and then taking it down to a simpler concept of like, yeah, but I'm just out here and I'm looking for you.
Yeah.
I just liked the idea of this like singular focus amidst a storm of chaos kind of thing. But I gotta say, I like your slant on it just as much, that it specifically deals with the relationship. That I years ago had a total like mental change on this. I was when we were doing the Shania Twain tour, I was doing a meet and greet afterwards, and somebody came up to me and they mentioned my song Before You Drive Me Crazy. And I said it helped them through a really difficult time in their life. And they explained to me, and I won't say what they said because it was quite personal, but they explained what they felt it meant and what the lyrics were about. And I, in my egotistical brain, in the back of my head, was like, "That's not what my song's about at all." I didn't say that. I was gracious. I thanked them. But then later that night, I was lying in bed in the hotel, and I remember specifically realizing, like, oh no, they're right and I'm wrong. Because when I think about every one of the songs that I've loved in my life, it doesn't necessarily matter what the artist intended when they wrote it. I heard it however I heard it. And unless, I go and speak to that artist about it and take it up with them, like that's always going to be my take on it. So I like that everyone will hear something different in every song. I think it's liberating as an artist because it's no longer my responsibility. Like you can feel early in your career this drive, and I certainly did, to be perfectly understood, to perfectly succinctly lay out your lyrics so that somebody knows exactly what you're saying. And the longer I tried to do that, the more I realized it didn't make it any clearer. Everyone will hear whatever they're going to hear. And so that's great, because at some point you can go, all right, well, this part here might be a little vague. And that's okay, because 10 people are going to hear it and they're going to hear 10 different things. And I think as long as I know why I'm writing it, then that's all good.
Well, it's kind of funny. It kind of leads me to my next question. Same song, but another line it is every John got a Jude, even the sun got the moon. I just want someone too. Now, once again, I thought you had such a great lyrical song right there. And my question is, how when you're writing a song, where as well as the line of vulnerability, how much of it are you willing to give up of yourself and put out there for people? How much you've it, of it, everything yourself. There's only so much I want to share with some, and kind of connected to it, is the writer of the character Wes of the song, not Wes, the writer or singer.
And I think it varies. I think there are songs where you're getting that I've got where you get a very literal take on something that happened in my life, exactly how I was feeling that moment. And then there's other songs where it's like, you allow yourself to step in something else a little bit. I mean, I try not to write for myself in a total what if environment. I find there's like a tendency of artists who are like wildly successful, by the time they're on their third album, they kind of have to what if the whole thing because they no longer seem to have any problems in their life. So it's like difficult to find any challenges. So you get these ridiculous stories that are like concocted, and I feel like it starts to feel a little distant from yourself. I think it's important to always bleed a piece of yourself into it. Some of it has to do with who you're writing with and the situation. Like same deal as what I was talking about when you walk onto a new film set. When you walk into a write, like when I wrote Looking for You, there were a couple of guys in that write who I'd never written with before. And it's immediately, how comfortable do you feel sharing pieces of yourself? And sometimes I've been doing this long enough where even if I don't feel comfortable with the person in the room, you can still sneak it into the lyrics. You can still know why you're putting it in. I think it's important to have a piece of yourself in there to make it feel like something, because I find otherwise then I won't ever want to record it. I won't ever want to sing it. If it's a song that just means nothing to me, like I'm sure I can technically execute that, but it won't cost the same thing.
So where can listeners find Hummingbird?
Everywhere. And it's sort of your smattering of streaming platforms. It's everywhere.
Well, Mr. Mack, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
Have a great night.